Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The report by the Wall Street Journal of more than 1,000 dead Nigerian soldiers being buried in secret as a way of concealing the true toll of President Buhari's war on insurgency on the military is one that has gripped the nation with a lot of foreboding. But as the import of that report was sinking in, President Buhari came out with a claim that his administration has succeeded in lifting more than 5 million Nigerians out of extreme poverty in the past 4 years. Well, to help us bring some perspective to this is Jideofor Adibe, Professor of Political Science at Nasarawa State University, Kefi, founding editor of the quarterly academic journal African Renaissance, founding co-editor of the Journal of African Affairs, and chairman of the Board of Trustees of the think tank Rogan Leadership Foundation. Jideofor Adibe, welcome to the program. Good morning.
Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Ruben.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you and your colleague.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, before we go into the Wall Street Journal and lifting 5 million people out of poverty, the big subject in Nigeria today is the proposed Revolution Now protests, on account of which Omoyele Sowore, former presidential candidate of the African Action Congress, has been arrested by the Department of State Security. But others in that coalition of NGOs are saying that they're going ahead with the protests. And the federal government has made it clear that this amounts to treason. And well, others have different opinions, like Femi Falana, like Professor Wole Soyinka, who insist that staging a peaceful protest does not amount to treason. What do you think?
Thank you very much, Ruben. You're right. Peaceful protest should not amount to treason in any place. But there are very interesting perspectives, interesting angles to the Sowore debacle. The first is that he called it a revolution. I do know that revolution does not necessarily mean forceful change of government. It can also mean radical change of government, radical progress. But then he was reported to have said that the DSS will cease to exist, the government will cease to exist. That will also be a source of concern for any government. But then the interesting sides to the, this unfolding drama is who is trying to play into the hands of who. Some people actually believe that, Sowore is orchestrating this in order to make himself the symbol of the opposition in Nigeria. That if you look at what happened today, virtually all the newspapers had him on their front pages. I don't think he ever got that kind of coverage, even when he ran as a presidential candidate of AAC. That is one perspective, that it was, he deliberately used the word revolution, told the DSS they will cease to exist, the government will cease to exist. And when you do that, it means you're trying to play sort of a martyr, and that you are presenting yourself to be, called in for questioning by the government. If that is so, then people are questioning Sowore's motive. On the other hand, there are people who believe that it's actually orchestrated by the government. Don't forget that Sowore was one of the supporters of Buhari in 2015 election, and that the government is uncomfortable about what is unraveling or happening at the tribunal, and therefore trying to create a situation where it will clamp down on opposition and using Sowore. We don't know. There are so many gaps. And when there are so many gaps, then conspiracy theories will tend to move in and fill the gaps.
Let's try and fill those gaps actually quickly before we move on to this discussion to do with the Wall Street Journal report. Because if the government has no constitutional grounds on which to stop a peaceful process which is constitutionally provided to the people, then what grounds can the government say that they are taking or arresting someone on? Because doesn't that then give the people more room to respond? I mean, all they've done now is make the Revolution Now process more known and even bigger. They've spread the hashtag, more people are aware, and really and truly, what they actually aim to achieve has gone the opposite way.
Yeah, but let's also be quite straight about this. If Showore had said he was organizing mass protest, probably the government would not have reacted the way it's doing. But this says revolution, and even if it had left it a revolution, you can argue that revolution does not necessarily mean forceful change of government. It's just any radical change can be called a revolution. But then he was reported to have said that the DSS will cease to exist and that the government will cease to exist. In fact, if you make such a statement, he's a journalist of sorts himself. He knows he will be called in for questioning. Of course, the concern is from the civil rights movement and from human rights perspective is if government has anything against him, let him be charged to court expeditiously. That should be our concern. But what people are also questioning, why will he make statements like that? He's no longer an innocuous personality around for presidency. And people are saying what he was unable to achieve, when he ran and got less than 40,000 votes, he now wants to achieve through revolutionary means. So it was also a wrong choice of words to talk about revolution and then followed it up with a threat, if reportedly a threat that the DSS will cease to exist. I am not saying that any government will call him for questioning, but we just want to make sure that in calling him for questioning, if the government has anything against him, if government is able to establish anything against him, he should be charged to court.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not trying to play the devil's advocate, but I just want to place before you some other reactions by other persons. There are persons who have said Showore also threatened to set himself ablaze, which is like, he would terminate his own existence, whatever. And there are persons who have said, we seem to be seeing a trend, like in form of a return to the dark days of General Sani Abacha, with, some of the sequence of events that we have had in recent times. The clampdown on the Islamic movement of Nigeria, the intimidation of Amnesty International Nigeria, the dismissal of anybody who criticizes government as unpatriotic, the selective attention of government to, rhetoric. People refer in this regard to the statement by a spokesperson of the Miyetti Allah, of a group in the north, an umbrella group for young people, saying that Southerners should leave the north at a certain point, and that such person was not even invited for any interrogation, or maybe that was not in the paper. So do you see a case of double standards as alleged, or do you also agree that we seem to be going back to the past that we left when we returned to civilian rule in 1999?
Yes, one of the recurrent allegations against the Buhari government is that he treats some groups with kids' gloves, especially these the headsmen, the Fulani groups, the Miyetti Allah. That's been a recurring. And then you can rightly say there is some sort of a legitimate crisis around the government, especially in the southern part of the country. That is okay. And but I don't really mind. I don't mind that Showore was called for questioning. I think it's also a wrong strategy. I think it's, however, a wrong strategy on the part of the government that they decided to put Amnesty International under security surveillance simply for retweeting a tweet from Showore. That's really shooting itself on the leg, because you are going to call the attention of other international NGOs and you are going to put yourself on the spot. However, with regard to Showore threatening to set himself ablaze, that will also be sufficient ground to call him for questioning. Remember, there's nothing wrong in the DSS or the government calling somebody for questioning. There's nothing wrong, except that in our own case, we all believe, and sometimes the security agencies give us to believe that they are acting out a script. If not for that, there is nothing wrong to explain yourself. What do you really mean by, revolution. When you say the government will cease to exist, what exactly do you mean? I don't think anything is wrong with that. And, certain kind of remarks. I don't think, Ruben, you will make such a statement yourself. You're not likely to go and say, if you're organizing a protest and you really want it to be mass protest and you don't want it to be, an attention-seeking venture or publicity-seeking venture, you're not likely to say, oh, by this time tomorrow, government will cease to exist, especially if he's a public figure. If it was just an unknown person, the government has to put into perspective whether the person has the capacity to effectuate the threat. In this situation, when he had threatened to set himself ablaze, as you said, then it behoves on any government to call him to question what really mean. If you set yourself ablaze, what exactly are you going to, do you hope to achieve by that? You can trigger a sort of uprising. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to see. Don't forget there's also another perspective to this. People who believe that he's actually acting on behalf for the government. That the government is using him, and then using him to muzzle down the opposition. If you want to say a gradual return to the Abacha days, we don't know. It's still, things are still evolving.
Are you saying that he's a double agent?
We don't know. I say there are contending perspectives. One perspective is that Sowore wants to position himself as the leader of the opposition, to be the symbol of opposition. God forbid he sets himself ablaze. He will become the symbol of opposition. And if the government detains him and mismanages it, as he seems to mismanage virtually everything, he will also become the symbol of opposition. On the other hand, if it was a setup so that the government can clamp on putative opposition, serious threat, and then people are talking about what's happening at the tribunal, that the government is anticipating one thing or the other that may not be favorable. So he uses Sowore now to create a scenario where he can then clamp down on any form of opposition and, if possible, declare a state of emergency. Again, we don't know. These are contending perspectives. If you like, you can call them conspiracy theories.
And of all of these conspiracy theories, just quickly in the next 10 seconds before we go on a break, which one of those theories resonates with you the most?
Well, maybe
we don't know. I'm just an analyst.
We'll take more of this, Professor, when we come back from a very quick break. Do stay with us. The morning show continues. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Professor Jideofor Adibe of Political Science at Nasarawa State University is still here with us on the morning show. Welcome back to the program, sir. Now, before we went on a break, I asked you which one of these conspiracies resonates with you the most since the news of Sowore's arrest.
I also answered that I'm not a prophet, so I can't claim to have heard from God which one was the right one. There are contending perspectives and things are still evolving. We don't know if it was a setup by the government or if it was, Sowore setting up the government and using the government to achieve his purpose. So there are different dynamics and they are still evolving.
Well, let's go back to the question of poverty, with President Buhari saying that in 4 years, his government has been able to lift 5 million people out of poverty. These 5 million people who benefited from the social investment program as defined in the Economic Growth and Recovery Plan, the ERGP, and also what he referred to as N-Power. Now, is that something to celebrate, something to boast about, considering the fact that we're told that Nigeria has overtaken India as the poverty capital of the world?
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. The government rolled out figures. It did not tell us the methodology by which it arrived at 4 or 5 million being lifted out of poverty. But I'll tell you this. In June 2018, the World Poverty Clock, did mention that Nigeria had 87 million people in multidimensional poverty. And there are people who exist or subsist on less than $1.90 per day. Earlier this year, the same World Poverty Clock reported that an additional 4 million Nigerians have been added to the poverty club. In other words, we are almost 92 million people now living in absolute poverty. And also the same World Poverty Clock tells us that 6 million Nigerians, every 6 minutes you have some 6 Nigerians every minute make it into the extreme poverty club. So it becomes, if government is lifting, let's assume, take the government's figures at face value. If it is true that they are lifting, they've lifted in 4 years, 4 million out of poverty. And we are told that every minute, 6 Nigerians join the extreme poverty clock. And in 1 year alone, Nigeria was able to add another 4 million. So you do the math yourself. So you can see that the gap still exists, assuming the government figures are true. If in 4 years they lifted 5 million people from poverty, and in 1 year, the World Poverty Clock told us that additional 4 million Nigerians had joined the extreme poverty club. That means that there is still a gap, a deficit of at least 4 million, if we take the government's figures. So if it is lifting people, it means you're not lifting them fast enough. It's not going to make a dent. If 6 million people every minute join the extreme poverty club, if in 1 year, it's a simple math, if in 1 year 4 million additional Nigerians joined the extreme poverty club, and in 4 years you lifted 5 million, which means you are roughly lifting 1.2 million people or thereabouts every year. Can't you see the gap is still there?
Yes, I see
so
the gap,
you're
but
not
just
doing
by way
enough.
of clarification, before now, President Buhari had also said over a period of 10 years, the government is going to put in place a plan to lift 100 million Nigerians, right?
That's 10 million a year, isn't it?
Yes, 10 million a year out of poverty. But
No.
as you said, that remains to be seen.
Ruben, you ran for office. You know, politicians can say you can bandy works. Economists and others will always talk about if current trends persist. We have to see the measures you've put in place, and we look at the trajectory. What are they being able to achieve? So whatever poverty alleviation program they have, it has been able to reduce, according to their figures, barely 1 million, just a little over 1 million a year. So we have to be talking on the basis of what is on the ground already. Because you can tell me, remember we've always been promised fantastic things. Let us work from what is on the ground.
So, Professor, where is
Based
all the
on
money
what you
that's
have
budgeted
said.
for this then going? Because clearly the social intervention programs are not necessarily bringing the number of people out of poverty as expected. We have trader money, we have the school feeding program, we have the 5,000 naira to the poorest homes program, or whatever the government has come out to call all of these programs. And people have been speculating and people have been concerned that the government is not being 100% honest about these programs. Clearly, if only 1 million people really and truly buy the figures that we're getting from the World Poverty Clock against what the president has said, if only 1 million people have been lifted out of poverty over the past year given these figures, then is it fair to say that the government is not necessarily spending this money on what it should be going on?
The tragedy of this government, and not just of the government, is that they don't do any impact analysis. If you started on a pilot project, some of the wasteful expenditures, I'm a critic of what the so-called trader money, you do a pilot and let us be able to see an impact study that shows this commitment has been able to help us achieve B. And then based on that, we are rolling out a program. We seem to be impulsively driven. On impulse, we bring out 1 or 2 projects, that will have, nice sounding monikers and emotionally charged words. Trader money, we're going to do and we go. No impact analysis. And then we spend the money on things that I consider wasteful. I was here in the last program. I was extremely critical of their so-called school feeding program. How much money has been spent on that school feeding program? What has it accomplished? We need to know these figures so that we can make impact analysis. This is what is spent and this is what is accomplished. And then we'll be able to know whether it is worth it. We don't have anything. We have no impact analysis studies. So you can come around tomorrow, just like with our figures, our population. You can come around and just throw figures that we've been able to lift 10 million people out of poverty. How did you do that? What methodology did you use? Are you talking of one-dimensional or multi-dimensional poverty? The government was simply silent on all this.
Well, one other topical issue that we mentioned in the introduction to this segment, namely the story by Wall Street Journal, alleging that about 1,000 Nigerian soldiers who fell at the battlefront were buried in unmarked graves somewhere in Maimalari in Borno State. The military, of course, has denied that, saying that they respect standards and they have procedures, protocols, and best practices. The presidential candidate of the PDP has called for a judicial commission of inquiry and that, this really needs to be investigated. What do you advise? What do you think?
Well, I think part of the mistakes the president made initially was to give the soldiers 3 months to defeat Boko Haram, and assuming or believing wrongly that he was engaged in a sort of conventional war rather than an asymmetric warfare, which is hardly won. So he raised hopes, and then he came up to say you have technically defeated them. I'm not even talking about if he had used, yes, you contend them, but Boko Haram has shown infinite capacity for reinventing itself. It started first by attacking government institutions, especially the police. Then he moved to attacking the church, to attacking the mosque, to attacking everybody. Moved from soft targets and suicide bombing. Now it is in the phase of attacking hard targets. It carries the battle to the military and installations. And that is where we are in the struggle, instead in the fight. And instead of, well, in a way, it's okay for the government to say it has made some remarkable progress. We have to give them credit. They recovered territories. But we don't necessarily have to live only in the past and in denial. The fact is that from all indications, Boko Haram is still as potent as ever. It's lethal. And if soldiers are being killed, well, government may not come to admit it openly, not to demoralize the civilian population, not to demoralize the army, but something urgently needs to be done. We need to rethink the entire fight. We need to find out. Jonathan was criticized for not doing enough. Sambo Dasuki is still languished in detention for apparently mismanaging the funds for fighting Boko Haram. We need to know how much has been spent since this regime in fighting Boko Haram.
Professor Adibe, we do have to go on a very quick break, but we will come back to you in just a couple minutes to continue this conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back. We still have Professor Jideofor Adibe with us in our Abuja studios discussing the report via Wall Street Journal about 1,000 secret graves for soldiers of the Nigerian military with regards to responses from the government in fighting Boko Haram insurgency. Now, Professor, before we went on a break, you were making a point, so you can continue.
Yes, I was just saying that the government raised the hopes of Nigerians by initially giving the military 3 months to defeat Boko Haram, and that it has, because of that, battling to maintain, to live up to that belief that as a former military general, yes, he was able to do it in 3 months. So he declared they had technically defeated Boko Haram. And I was trying to mention that what has happened with Boko Haram is that it has shown infinite capacity for reinventing itself, and that it has moved from attacking the police, attacking churches, attacking mosques, attacking soft targets, to attacking hard targets, and that the government has to appreciate that this is the phase, this is the current status of Boko Haram. It's carrying the battle to the military. Instead of living in denial, they have to change their own strategy and know that the game has changed and it has to change accordingly. If it is true that 1,000 soldiers were hurriedly buried in mass graves, which means that the families of those affected were not even given the chance to take the corpse of their children and bury them decently. That's something the government should look into, if it is true, because the government has denied. And the Wall Street Journal has also reiterated its position that it was right, and is even claiming that more than 1,000 soldiers were buried in mass graves. So the government simply has to come to terms with the fact that Boko Haram, contrary to its claim, has not been defeated. It simply has reinvented itself, and is a new phase of the fight.
Perhaps maybe what government also needs to do is to reinvent its strategy. We keep hearing about strategy all the time, but we haven't seen enough capacity on the part of government to tackle the Boko Haram at the level of strategy and inventiveness. But let's talk about something else. I mean, recently, after about 5 months, 6 months down the line, we were now told that we'll have a cabinet. The Senate has done the screening of the ministerial nominees, 43 of them, and at least all the 43 have been confirmed, and the president has been so notified. But we still don't have that cabinet properly inaugurated yet. And there's still a lot of speculation, a lot of doubt, a lot of conspiracy theories, to use your phrase, about how portfolios will be distributed. What's your take on the process leading to the submission of the names of those nominees, the screening process by the Senate, and then the continuing confusion over what will happen?
Well, it took the president 5 months from the time he was declared winner of the election to assemble a cabinet. And most of the names were people, the usual suspects. I mean, the people, no surprise, very few surprises. We have come to live with it, that this is the pace he wants to go. Nobody's expecting him to, have that sense of urgency in the way he does things anymore. And that is partly why you have the Showorez. If you don't pluck, we talked about low-hanging fruits, which the government should have plucked early in the life of this government. He didn't care. So some of these, assuming that, as I say, there are different contending perspectives on Showorez, assuming that this is a mass protest, remember it's called Global Coalition for Security and Democracy. The name does not suggest anything overthrowing the government. If it is simply a group that are very, very dissatisfied at the way things are going, at the pace things are going, then the government also has part of the blame. But taking you so long, and even after that, we will not be surprised if it takes another 1 month before they are giving portfolios. And as I speak, I'm not even sure that the president has formally named his SSA media. Garba Shehu issues statements, additional issue statements, but I'm not aware that they have been formally reappointed as SSA media, and I'm not sure. It is simply his style, and every government has his style. Donald Trump has his style. We simply have to take this as Buhari's style. In the Senate, we are not expecting...
when he came out with this cabinet list. And one of the greatest concerns, not just of the opposition, but of the people as a whole, was the lack of inclusivity in terms of gender. That was one way of us looking at it. And then, of course, we also even had a discussion on this show about disability rights in Nigeria and what it means if you do not have disabled citizens as well at the forefront of political matters. The inclusivity of the president's cabinet is absolutely uninspiring. Or would you say that you differ on this? Because I think that is even beyond his own style. I think it's just important when you're putting out a cabinet to ensure that your cabinet actually represents all aspects of your people, which it clearly doesn't.
Yeah, you're right. Remember, at a point, Buhari said, talked about inclusiveness, he made all the right noises. And some of us said, well, let's see, because I believe it's a matter of mindset. The president has his own mindset. And we talked about gender balance all along. We talked about bringing more young people into the cabinet. And he seemed to buy into it. Did you see it happen?
The
So
youngest
it's an
person is
issue of
44.
mindset. And yeah, so we just have to say this is his style, but just like Trump has his own style. And it can be extremely annoying to some people. Maybe that's one of the things that's, animating the Showore group to want to protest and to call it a revolution. We don't know, but I am one of the people. I've come here and I've said it repeatedly in my writings and here, extremely disappointed. He had the opportunity even on the day of inauguration. He made no speech. He made no appointment. On June 12th, he made no speech. He presented an inaugural speech on that day and then made no appointment, So this is his style, and we simply have to say, well, we are not the ones who were elected. He was the one who was elected, and he can choose his style. Ultimately, the people, if we go to the poll, if there's an opportunity, people would then have opportunity to, express their preferences if his party is still there around to present itself again. But I agree with you, but we expected, some of us, we look forward to something completely different from what we are getting.
Well, Jideofor, thank you very much, but are you talking about style over substance? Because I guess previously you were talking about substance. Now you are placing a lot of emphasis on style. And it comes across as if you are making excuses.
There's a convergence. There is the style can be the substance. It's both. Your style is that you don't want to be hurried. We don't know whether it's because you're insensitive to your environment and public opinion, or because you simply don't want to be bullied by public opinion. Well, you say, now the substance, you want to be more inclusive. You stay cornered everything for people. You are going to inclusiveness, bring in more experts, bring in more younger people. We got more of the same. So the substance and the style converge. We just have to wait and see if maybe that's exactly what people believe, that the only thing that can, steer this government to action will be to threaten a revolution. I personally don't believe that revolution achieves anything in history. You're a student of literature yourself. You can read Animal Farm, you can read You can read 1984 by George Orwell. You can look at what happened with the American Revolution of 1775 to 1783, which ended up bankrupting France. You look at Iranian Revolution, which radicalized the Middle East. You look at Russian Revolution with its huge bloodshed, which was not only unable to enthrone a representative government, but they cost him bloodshed. You look at the Arab Spring. Revolution has a tendency to devour its children. So it has emotionally appealing message. But then what happens when the revolution settles? Iran Revolution of 1979 was the beginning of the radicalization of Middle East. So there's nothing, let me come back to it, that American Revolution achieved in terms of education and that Canada and Switzerland did not achieve. What did French Revolution achieve? 1789 to 1799. What did it achieve that other countries did not, with less bloodshed? Back home, the closest we had to a revolution.
Yeah,
back home, the closest to a revolution we had.
Please go ahead.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I said back home, if we talk about the closest to revolution, if you look at the speeches they made by Nzogwu and Buhari in 1983, what happened afterwards? Nzogwu's coup, despite being called a revolution, it triggered a chain of events that culminated in civil war. Buhari, when he came around, remember the respected delegate was even calling for those arrested to be all killed off. What happened just 1 year down the line? People looked at it, and Zeribe came up with a book, Nigeria, Another Hope, He Betrayed. And the labeling Buhari got from that, he's still living on that. He became the first, the only northern leader of a major political party that I know of who was unable until 2015 to get 25% votes in any part of the South. So revolution has an emotionally appealing message. But when the dust settles, what happens? I believe that there are changes. We don't need to destroy the house in order to rebuild it. We can still find a shelter in a corner of the house while repairing the roof. That's my own take on revolution.
I'm sure that for the rest of this week, and maybe even beyond, there will be a lot of talk about revolution, what it means, whether it's system change, institutional change, or regime change in Nigeria. And there will be conflicting perspectives, as you pointed out. But I have before me here the Vanguard of today, the Vanguard newspaper. And the Vanguard, in its report on this whole crisis about revolution now or not, has provided a summary of what the protesters are demanding on page 51. It says key demands: all governments must pay the 30,000 minimum wage. 2, abolition of tuition fees in universities and secondary schools. 3, stop the killings in the country and sack all the incompetent service chiefs. 4, stop all estimated billing by the power companies. Provide prepaid meters for free. And communities must have the right to audit the electricity bills they get and review the licenses of all discos. 5, free all political prisoners now, including El Zakzaki and his wife. And then 6, employment for the youths. Does this sound revolutionary? Does this sound like regime change?
Let me say, I read this, but that's just what they say. All mass movements, or even revolution, they thrive on simplistic messages that will, appeal to the emotions. Nobody will quarrel with those messages because they are just, they are ideal. But do you really expect the government, I teach in the university, do you really expect the universities that are discussing on how to increase school fees in order to run the universities to suddenly say make them free? It's not feasible. Are you going to sell Buhari? Bring back fuel price to what it was in 1999, which was one of their demands, when they were actually discussing how to increase it more. It's not feasible. So you need all this kind of populism in order to get the backing of the populace. And that's all. It has the same ingredient with mass movements. It has the same thing with revolution. Remember, if you look at the French Revolution, it's freedom, equality, and fraternity. What happened after that?
Thank you very much,
The American one was...
Thank you very much, Professor. Unfortunately, we have run out of time on this discussion, but thank you for this extensive insight on a number of matters at hand here in Nigeria at the moment.